the Halloween party where I met the love of my life. The moment I caught my reflection in the mirror, I knew one darn thing for sure. This Barbie was gonna find his Ken. Mostly because this Barbie was done being single. People of my age were getting into serious relationships, marriage, and even having babies. And here I was, at least a million miles away from any of that. I decided I was gonna change that. Although I didn't trust myself 100%, there was one person who was sure I'd find someone nice sooner rather than later. Who was it? Of course, my best friend Edward. "Damn," he said and whistled. "Look at you." He pointed at the entirety of me. "Nice?" I asked, a little nervous. "Dude, you look so..." He struggled a little for words. "You look so Barbie," he concluded. "Your hair goes well with the look, and the attire too." He looked at his watch. "I think I should go home. It's getting late. My mom's gonna kill me." I snorted. "Still scared of mommy?" "You bet I am," he answered. "Why don't you sleep here then?" I suggested and looked at myself in the mirror. Even if I didn't win the petty competition, I was sure going to own this Halloween party. "You can take the couch." "Hey!" I shouted and turned to see him lying face first on my bed. "My bed is off limits." Edward poked his head through the comforters to roll his eyes at me. He then returned to whatever he was doing. I huffed. Not that I didn't like him. Edward made for the best pillow if he wanted to, but he was also straight, at least as far as I was aware, considering he had a girlfriend once. Besides, waking up with your face just inches away from your best friend just felt awkward as heck, right? Alright, at least just leave the right side. He did not. He rolled on the right side, got under the comforters, and whispered a goodnight to me. "Edward," I said patiently. He pointed at the window on the right side, on the side he was lying. "I will protect you from any ghost that comes through that window. Promise. Let me sleep now." He got under the comforters and then peeked at me. "Don't worry, you'll find your Ken at the party." 5 minutes later, he was snoring. I sighed. The next day. The Halloween party was tomorrow, and Edward and I were sitting at a bench right outside our uni. I asked him what he was gonna wear. He skillfully dodged the question and instead started reciting the names of my current crushes on his fingers. I had 4 crushes, until 2 weeks ago. Liam, my 4th one, turned out to be a mean-spirited, dumb loser, and I had to get off of his back, so I did. "Which one do you hope to have tomorrow?" I shrieked out a laugh. It was a shrill laugh, and I was not proud of it. "Have, you said?" I repeated, as if I could choose. I would be blessed to have any of the 3's attention on me. I said the same to him. I just want them to look at me. "You're counting on 3 guys. Shouldn't you choose one? Cheater." I squawked. "Don't call me that!" "Choose one," he said. He sounded serious, as if he had some stakes on it. I immediately thought of one name. It happened to be William. Edward looked at me a little closely. He was certainly thinking of something, but I couldn't tell what it was. "William," he repeated. I nodded my head. "William's awesome, and he's also nice as hell." William was our college's star swimmer, and that just made him even more attractive. Besides, he was known for his friendliness. Among all the 3 crushes, I wanted to be with him the most. "Well," Edward began, "I hope you find your love tomorrow." "Now," I said, "what are you gonna wear tomorrow?" He flicked me off. It was the night of the Halloween party, and although Edward and I had planned to go to the party together, that loser ditched me at the last minute with a simple text that went something along the lines of, "Hey bud, you should leave. I'll be a little late. We'll catch up soon." So now, in my Western Barbie attire, I was sitting at a bus stop and waiting for a bus. It was cold, and I was stupid enough to forget to bring a jacket. I counted the minutes in my head and rubbed my bare arms, and a bus soon arrived. I hopped in, and would you know who I found on the bus? Yep, that's right, William Smith was on that bus, and that was the least surprising thing of all. Even though it was late and the bus's lights did little to illuminate any of its passengers, I could clearly see that he was dressed as Ken, and he wasn't just in any other Ken attire, but his outfit choice mirrored mine. Cowboy boots paired up with a long-sleeved fringe shirt. It looked as if he had almost done his research into it. The outfit was identical to what Ryan Gosling wore in the movie. I appreciated this effort. Our similar choices almost made me feel delusional. Heck, it was true after all. We were similar to each other. Would it not be nice to be together after all of this? As luck would have it, we sat opposite each other, and because my senses were so heightened, I couldn't look away from him. Every 2 seconds, I found my unwavering attention back on him. He was handsome, the epitome of male beauty, and I understood in every second why I liked him so much. But I was not subtle, and William caught me stealing glances at him. "Hey," he said. "Do we know each other?" Now was the time. I knew, yet I fumbled. Yes, sociology class, together," I answered. Nothing of what I said made sense, but I was sure he could piece together those words. "Right," he said, and gave a little smile. "Mrs. Smith?" "Yes, she was our sociology professor." He pointed at our outfits, so he did notice. "Barbie?" He pointed at me. "Yeah, Ken?" I asked him. He laughed. "Yeah." I couldn't control my smile after that. At the next stop, when we were still 3 stops away from my destination, I got up and walked to his side. "Can I sit here?" I asked. He hesitated in the slightest, even looked a little nervous, but nodded anyway. He was a little stiff, I noticed. To make sure he wasn't uncomfortable, I made sure we didn't touch. "Since you seem to be going in the same direction as me, I assume you're going to Holden's party?" I asked, pointing in the direction the bus was driving. He nodded his head with a little smile. "Great," I said, and smiled back. In the minutes that we sat by each other, I realized that there were a few undeniable truths about William. Those minutes served as a glaring reminder of what kind of character I had a crush on, and yet, as stupid as I would sound, I hung on to every single opportunity I got to be close to him. 1. He did have the charm he was so famous for. He was polite in his mannerisms, a little controlled even, but he knew how to lighten up the mood. It was amazing. In the 17 minutes that we stayed on the bus, I fell more for him. He knew how to talk, and he wouldn't shut up. 2. His behavior with his friends was opposite to how he had behaved around me. The moment we reached Holden's huge place, he changed. I'm unsure what happened, but he stepped a little away from me and looked a little more unsure and nervous about being close to me. The moment he caught eyes with his group of friends, he left without even saying goodbye. Although I knew William owed me nothing because, hell, we didn't even know each other for me to feel hurt, but I did feel hurt. With a disappointed sigh, I looked for my best friend, the only person who could lift my spirits in such a situation. Unfortunately, I couldn't find him. When I called him, he didn't pick up, and when I messaged, he didn't reply. I decided to wait on him a little more, but because he wasn't there, I had nothing to do but interact with strangers and drink my way through the crowd. An hour passed, and there was no word from Edward. I grew weary and upset because Edward hadn't yet called. I decided I could either wait for him outside of this crowd or just leave the party altogether. On my way out through the dark hallways of the huge place, I stumbled into William. I tried to ignore him, but he caught my wrist and pulled me onto the other side to make sure people didn't stumble onto us. He dropped my wrist immediately afterwards. "Hey," he said, "are you leaving already?" I shrugged, still a little upset about earlier. "Come on," he said. "I know a quieter place. It's better than this mess." He asked me to follow him into another hallway, and this one led to several bedrooms. Even though I played my part of looking uninterested, well, at least in my opinion, I still flushed at the thought of being alone with him. Surely, whatever conversations we had on the bus left an impression on him? Otherwise, why would he seek me out of all the people in the party? He stood in front of a skylight and opened it, and the cool air hit us at once. I suddenly realized how underdressed I was. Surely, this outfit was my choice, and I would wear it again if I had to, but evenings were growing cold. I rubbed my arms a little and huffed a few breaths. "Would you like a jacket?" he asked, and moved to remove the jacket he had over his fringed shirt. I told him there was no need, but he shared it with me anyway. "Please, I insist, it's cold." "Will you not be cold?" I asked, and draped it over my shoulders. He shrugged. "I'm kinda used to it, swimming and all, you know." He smiled and gave me a subtle glance. "It looks nice on you," he said, and pointed at all the pink I was wearing. He was blushing and nervous. It was the most unusual combination I'd ever seen on a man. It was definitely interesting. I colored a shade of red. It was exactly what I wanted to hear from his mouth. A lot of people had already complimented me, but it was his words that mattered the most. "Thank you, it was my best friend's idea." He poked the inside of his cheek. "Your best friend?" "Yes, Edward, nice dude, tall as heck. If you noticed me around the campus, you must have seen me with him." I stopped to think for a while. "He even tried to get on the swimming team once. There was He loudly cleared his throat. He looked nervous. He looked around the place and came a little closer. "I was thinking," he began, hesitation coloring his face. "Would you like to leave To my place, maybe? Leave? I repeated. I had an idea what he meant, but his nervousness was making it difficult for me to understand what he wanted. Surely the college's star swimmer wouldn't be too shy to ask for a kiss or something more than that? To your place? To do what? He stepped back, clearly worried that he misunderstood the situation. I'm sorry, he began nervously. I thought He was freaking out. I just couldn't understand why that was so, but I slowly reached for his hand. Hey, it's alright, I told him. I'm sorry if I misread, he said, huffing out each word. He was making an effort. Hey, it's alright, take a few breaths, I told him, and counted with him. It's alright, I told him again. Do you want to kiss me? Is that it? I asked a few minutes later. He swallowed, but did not answer. He was worried. Should I kiss you? Would you like that? I don't know, he answered. I reached for his cheek and held it tenderly. Okay, if you feel uncomfortable, you can always tell me to stop, alright? It was only after he nodded that I kissed him. For a few seconds, he didn't move at all. I grew worried and decided to pull back, but he held me around my waist and did not let me go. Why that was, I did not know. He tried to kiss me properly, and he was somewhat sloppy, almost as if he didn't have any experience at all. So I went slow with him, and he followed along. Then he pulled back. His breath was a little rough now. He didn't only look nervous, but now also scared as hell. Even so, when I didn't make a move to pull away, he cornered me and kissed me again. I would have been an idiot to not take advantage of being kissed like this by my crush. 2, 3, 4, or maybe 5 minutes later, we pulled back to breathe properly. He finally smiled and laughed. It was nice, he told me. Thank you. I raised an eyebrow at the little gratitude he showed me, but didn't say anything. If a stranger had seen his face at that moment, William would have looked so happy to them. His happiness was obvious in his eyes. Later, I would wonder if he was that happy to kiss me, or merely happy to finally have kissed a boy. Should we go to my place? I asked, indicating the earlier question. Yeah, just, he said a little less nervously now. Let me find Edward. I need to tell him. I pulled back. Okay, he said and nodded. He stepped back. I'll wait for you at the bus stop? I nodded. Edward thankfully arrived by then. It took me less than 15 minutes to find him among the crowd of people, and when I found him, the surprise was obvious on my face. Even though I'd asked him several times what he was dressing up as, he never told me his plans. Now, he was dressed as... You're Ken, I told him the obvious. He laughed and shrugged. I wanted to surprise you. Is that why you took so long to come? I asked, and he nodded. And you've surprised me. I fingered the colorful outfit before patting him on his chest. I need to tell you something. Really important, though. Whose jacket is that? He asked, and poked William's jacket. William's, I answered, and I'm going to his place. I'm sorry, did something happen? I nodded my head. We kissed, I replied, and kept my voice low. And I'm going over to his place. For what exactly? He asked. You know exactly what. He swallowed. Hugh, I'm here for you. I even dressed in this stupid outfit for you, and now you're going off with a stranger? We haven't even talked like 10 minutes. It's not my fault you came late, I answered. We can catch up later. It was his idea that I dress up as such and win over my crush, and now that I had, he was upset? And of course I'm going off with him. He's been my crush for a while. Does he even like you back? He asked, and although the question sounded reasonable, I still hated him for implying that it was a one-sided affair, all because we didn't talk for 5 minutes? Well, I won't know that until I sleep with him. He went silent for a whole minute before giving a brief answer. If you're not going to be here, then I'm going home, he said, shrugged off my hand, and left the party immediately. I knew we had plans to spend long hours at the party together, but hooking up with my potential crush was also my goal. And now he was upset over something we'd been discussing for ages. I really just couldn't understand him. I knew William was waiting for me at the bus stop, so I decided to go with him. I bit my tongue and dragged my feet towards the bus stop. And would you know, Edward was correct? Although sleeping with William fulfilled my age-old fantasy, I couldn't help but feel empty after it. I was completely happy to be lying naked next to my crush. I couldn't deny that, yet I felt something was out of place. William's behavior after that night started creating doubts in my head. First off, he ignored me. I'm unsure how to explain this particular situation, but it was obvious that he was avoiding me, at least in front of his friends. 1 week passed and not once did he look at me or ask me to meet his friends. It was almost like he'd forgotten what we did that night. On top of all that, Edward kept his distance from me. He was upset and hurt, and I didn't know how to poke him around either, so I avoided him. By the time the 2nd week rolled around, I nearly gave up on William. The swimmer caught me on my way home. How he did that, I have no idea. It was dark, and he started walking by my side without saying a word. I was upset at him, so I kept my silence and kept walking. When we were a safe distance from the campus, he cleared his throat and apologized for his behavior. I had nothing to say to him. "I get that you're angry," he began, "but I was busy." "Please, shut up, William." I stopped at the bus stop. "You don't have to explain yourself if you don't want to. You can keep your dumb excuses to yourself." He rubbed a hand through his hair. He looked agitated, but I was still upset. "I'm not gonna scream at you if you're worried about all that. You don't owe me anything. Hell, it's not like we're dating. Yet, come over to my place," he said. I looked at him. "What does that mean?" "I'll explain everything then." "You can do that here," I said. "Please." He was practically begging now. "Hugh, I need to properly explain." If Edward had been there, he would have asked me to not go. After all, what was so secret that William couldn't share here in this peaceful place? It wasn't like there were a lot of people around. Yet, as stupid as I was, I decided to go to his place. Did he explain himself at his home? No. He apologized a million times, and he promised he'd be more careful about me, and then we kissed and slept together again. Nothing happened after that. Whatever crush I had on him was fading fast. It was almost like it was running low on fumes. It did not feel like a mutual crush, but a desperation from his side. He looked infatuated and definitely not with me. And the only person who could help me through all this mess was my best friend, Edward, the man who I had unconsciously pissed off. 2 days after that night, I decided to seek out Edward. It was the first time in years that we'd stayed away from each other for so long. I was worried for him and ashamed of myself. I needed to help him, and I needed his comfort. On the 3rd day, I decided to visit him at his place. Even though Edward's family did well financially, he stayed with them. It was said to be a cultural thing, and I both liked it and disliked it. I disliked it because there was little privacy. I liked it because I loved the familial environment of the entire place. They always seemed so happy, something that lacked in my own family. I rang the bell and Edward opened the door. When he saw me and the state I was in, he stepped aside and let me in. I was grateful he didn't throw a fit. It would have been embarrassing and further damaging to our friendship. "Speak," he said, and sat down on his study table. He kept his curious eyes on me. Not gonna offer me a glass of water? You're my best friend and an accepted member of this family. Go and bring one." And that was how I knew things were okay between us. "Can I hug you?" I asked. He raised an eyebrow. "Why?" But I didn't wait for his response. I got up and hugged him. "I missed you," I said. Thankfully, he hugged me in return. I'm sorry for blowing up." "I'm sorry too." We decided to eat dinner in his bedroom. His family had long gone to sleep by then, and the only sound one could hear was of us chatting. I told him that not once did William broach the topic of dating. It was almost like he just wanted to kiss and sleep with me, and then forget about it altogether. Almost as if I was a secret, a guilty pleasure that he wouldn't admit, even if insulted left and right, and it hurt me. "It's not like you guys are dating," Edward began. "Drop that loser." "But he's nice," I said, a little desperately now. "And ashamed of you," Edward added. He sighed when he saw the hurt in my eyes. "Hugh, think about it. He doesn't want to be seen with you in public. You're out, he's not. Nobody knows he likes guys. Heck, I'm pretty sure he had girlfriends. Why does he only come to you when he's sure no one's around? Something's going on there, Hugh." "I don't know," I answered. "It's all right. You don't have to know everything. Next time he seeks you out, ask him what he wants. Be straightforward, Hugh." He went silent. When I looked up at him, I saw him staring at my mouth. That confused me. He suddenly caught my eyes and blushed a shade of red. "There's something," he began and cleared his throat, "on your mouth." "Oh," I said, a little heated myself. I rubbed a thumb on the bottom lip, right where he indicated, but nothing came off. Edward sighed, and a minute after that came closer, and hence leaned over and rubbed a thumb over my bottom lip. "And got it," he whispered, and showed me his thumb. I swallowed at the realization of our proximity. Thanks, I replied and cleared my throat. I could feel my heartbeat, and my heart acted as if it were ready to jump out of my ribcage any second now. I didn't understand this reaction. It wasn't like the first time Edward had cleaned something off of my mouth. When he moved back, I dropped my gaze. This moment was unnecessarily tense. Maybe sleep here, he said. It's late. Are you sure? I asked. When have I not been about you, Hugh? There was no reservation between us, so whenever we spent the night at each other's place, we slept on the same bed. This night was no different. He had his back to me, and I was unsure what happened or what I was thinking, but when he sighed a little into the nearly dark room, I told him that it would have been nice if he were my boyfriend. He didn't say a thing, but when I looked around the room, Edward's Ken outfit came to my attention under the moonlight. Since we had left the window open just the slightest, it blew in the winds, and I wondered if it was trying to tell me something. It took William another 3 days after that to contact me. I was in the washroom when he walked in there. When he saw me, he checked the entire place for anyone else's presence. When I tried to walk past him, he caught my hand, pulled me into an empty cubicle, locked the door, and cornered me. Be my boyfriend, he said. Please, be my boyfriend. Date me. It was all so sudden that I was taken aback by his earnestness. He meant what he said. William, I said, I understand I've been annoying and irresponsible, but I want to change that. And how is that one tag going to change that, I wondered. How will that change anything, I asked him. And as if to provide me with a glaring hint, a bunch of students walked into the washroom just then. The louder and more obnoxious they got, the more silent William grew. It was obvious he was freaking out. He was not ready, and I didn't want to stay as someone's dirty secret. When I kissed him, he did not reciprocate. He was so gripped by fear that he barely even moved. I stepped back into that tiny space. I did not want to force him. William, I said softly, you're allowed to take your time. You do not love me, and weeks ago you probably didn't even care for me. It's okay, you'll find someone. But William didn't say anything. He held my wrist tightly, but he neither moved nor said anything. I knew it was because he didn't want anyone to know it was him. When the boys left, he rested his head on my shoulder. He took a deep breath and said, You were my first kiss with a boy. You're also the first guy I slept with. He pulled back, his eyes a little watery now. I'm not very good with these things, but I know when I want something, and right now, I want you. It was very clear what he was implying. He didn't like me, but was merely infatuated with me. Ours was the first male romantic affair in his life, and he didn't want to lose this security. Unfortunately for me, even though it was clear that this was going to be a doomed relationship, I accepted his proposal. We stayed boyfriends for nearly 2 weeks before a new set of trouble brewed in between us. In those 2 weeks, William treated me nicely. Heck, I could even say I started liking him more than I ever did. It was true that whenever we were outside, he would keep his distance from me. Once or twice, when his friends saw me with him, they whistled something obnoxious. Although the comment wasn't that harmful, William started keeping his distance once more. He was different in private though. We watched movies, had nights out, kissed, and slept together several times, and to be honest, I grew fond of him, but it just wasn't enough. Every time he acted as if I didn't exist in front of his friends, I felt hurt and sought out Edward. Edward, bless his heart and his love for me, helped me through the hurt every single time. During those 2 weeks, I started drawing comparisons between William and Edward. It wasn't something new. I had always compared Edward with my ex-boyfriends. I didn't know why it was so, but that helped me understand what was missing in my ex-boyfriends. Edward was the standard, and I didn't know why until those 2 weeks I spent as William's boyfriend. One such moment happened to be at the cafeteria. William and his friends were sitting 2 benches away from us. Although Edward tried to distract me from the sight in front of us, I just couldn't ignore it. It was still the 2nd week of our relationship, and there was William with a girl on his lap. Whatever his friends were saying was loud and clear to our ears. She was his ex-girlfriend, and her name was Cindy. Going by the words they were saying, chances were that they would get back together soon. I just knew that an hour later, William would be calling me and telling me he wanted to kiss me. What was going on with him? Hey, Edward said and looked into my watery eyes. Don't cry. And when a couple of tears slipped out of my eyes anyway, he sighed, grabbed his coffee, and got up. He walked to where William was sitting and threw the coffee at him. There was a roar of complaints, but he ran away from there. I was so shocked by the entire thing that I just didn't move. My tears had long stopped. I silently grabbed our bags and lunch and slipped out of there. I hoped they wouldn't find my idiot best friend. I found him on the staircase. I dropped his bag by his side and sighed. "He's not a bad guy, you know," I told him. He shrugged. "Still can't go around and hurt you like that. You probably gave him a 3rd-degree burn." "Chill, it wasn't that hot. Just some cold water and he'll be aight." He rolled his eyes and cracked his fingers. When he saw I was not pleased by the entire thing, he huffed. "What are you so upset about anyway? Do you love him?" "Even if I don't, it doesn't justify what you did. He could have been hurt." "He hurt you, and that's all I can see," he said. When I opened my mouth to say something else, he got up and leaned over me. Our height difference was always apparent, but with him standing on the stairs, it was clearer. "I will not let you be stupid," he began. "You don't owe him anything, Hugh. If he can't even say he likes you to his friends, what else are you expecting from him? He had his girlfriend on his lap 10 minutes ago." "I feel sorry for him," I replied. "You don't have to. He's not a sorry figure. He'll come around." He brought his hand to my face and rubbed a finger over the loose fringes on my temple. "If it's about you being desperate as hell for some boyfriend, don't go running around for others." I looked into his eyes. "What's that supposed to mean?" He poked a finger into my temple. "Have you ever thought of me?" He didn't meet my eyes, and his breathing was a lot more erratic now. I couldn't understand this sudden change in his behavior. It was almost like a confession, if I dare to call it that. I swallowed my bile. "Are you saying that we should date?" He shrugged. "I mean, how weird would kissing me feel like, us being best friends and all?" "And you not being gay?" I said the thing that made me curious the most. "I'm not straight," he declared. "I can tell that much." "Hey," I told him, "I've already played that game with William. I don't think you want to play another game so soon. Stop being funny." He pulled back. "I'm not kidding, Hugh," he began, his expression a lot more softened and nice now. "It's indeed true that I've never tried to make it obvious. Not really." He stopped and smiled a little. "But I've known about myself for a while. About you, too." "What about me?" I asked him as my fingers bravely and unconsciously traced the patterns on his jacket. Outside, I heard students lighting up firecrackers. It was a thing for now. New Year was upon us. Edward swallowed. "It's another thing I could never build up the courage to talk about. But it was my ex who made me realize I wasn't as straight as I thought," he laughed. "She knew long before I did." I laughed. "Heck, no wonder you wouldn't shut up about your dad's best friend in high school." He chuckled, and his mouth looked as if it was in a permanent state of smiling. "I suppose." "That was the biggest hint. Jesus," I said, still laughing. We went silent for a while and stared at each other. It was when the cold air slipped through the slightly ajar windows that I thought back to something. The Halloween party! It made sense now. I remembered him promising me that I would find my Ken at the party itself. William didn't work out, and Edward was dressed as one. It made sense now. "Were you feeling off at the party because I overlooked you?" He shrugged. "I hoped you'd noticed." "You didn't. It hurt, not gonna lie." "I'm sorry, Edward," I told him, and I meant it. "I'll never hold that against you, Hugh," he said and came closer. His fingers were a little bolder now, and so were mine. Edward and I had been best friends for almost 15 years of our lives, yet falling into this pattern didn't seem unnatural. It was almost as if our minds and bodies were wanting to fall into this way. It made sense then that I didn't feel weird when his fingers touched my lips. All I did was swallow, I swear. I could even promise I grew a little warmer under his touch. I felt feverish, almost. "All right," I said and smiled. "Then I don't know how it would feel to kiss you." I huffed out a laugh. I was nervous, but strangely, my body and mind were up for the challenge. It wanted to have that intimate touch with Edward. "Should I kiss you?" he asked, and then looked into my eyes. "Just to check," he clarified, as if worried that he might have crossed boundaries. He even made a move to pull back his fingers. "If you want to," I told him, but he didn't move, almost as if he was afraid to break the spell. I took it in my hands. I grabbed him around his neck and pulled him down for a kiss. Fortunately, he had the sense to kiss back. Minutes later, when we pulled back, he huffed out a laugh. I swear we were happy despite the sudden change in the situation. "Well, did you like it?" I asked, laughing along with him. He nodded, but instead of answering, he just kissed me again. I guess that was an answer enough. William came to my place 2 days later. His skin was a little red around his neck, but he said he was okay. I told him that Edward would soon apologize for the silly thing he did. He waved my apology away and said that he needed it as his wake-up call. This semester's gonna end soon anyway, he began, after sharing a bunch of apologies. And I was thinking maybe we should officially go out. Cindy and I aren't doing anything. It was just my friends being silly. William, I began, about that. I don't think we should continue this. I don't understand. I mean, you're clearly not ready for it, William, and I don't think it'll work anyway. I rubbed my hands together. Besides, you've always looked more excited about touching a boy than touching me, and maybe you need some time for yourself. I showed him a hand before he could speak. I'm sort of going out with Edward. Oh, he said. Congratulations. We're still figuring out stuff, but thanks. When he got up to leave, I grabbed his wrist. Whatever the situation may be, William, I'm always here. If you need to talk to anyone, then you can come to me. He smiled at me. Thanks. Somewhere around New Year's Eve, Edward and I decided we would go and spend the next 2 months away from all this hustle and bustle. Our main goal was to spend more time with each other to understand our relationship in an entirely new light. We were no longer just best friends. But I couldn't help but think about William too. 2 days before the semester break, as Edward snored by my side, I messaged William and asked him if he wanted to come with us. He replied the next morning, and it read, "If you guys want, I'll be there." By the end of the week, we packed our stuff and left for the place we intended to spend the next 2 months in. Edward and I often kissed, but we were still a little awkward around each other. We have not slept together yet, but I was hoping it would happen during our vacation. William, on the other hand, is still as squeamish as he was all this time. He didn't tell anyone about his sexuality, not even us, but he no longer shied away from talking about men here and there. Edward and I silently decided to play his guardian and wingman. Whoever the next man in his life would be, Edward and I intended to help him get through it. The end. It is indeed a complicated question, but is it okay to assert that you need to stay by a person's side as they figure out their sexuality, all the while overlooking the hurt that they're causing you? Thanks for watching. Consider subscribing to become a part of our Rainbow Force, and stay wholesome.